What's up, everybody? What's up, what's up? What's up, MNC? Good to know you can hear and see me. This is DJ Toddwards over here, bringing you the funky, royalty-free beats. And that's right, we can introduce my co-DJ, Jerome, the Palm Tree. He's going to be here playing that good music all night. Give it up for Jerome, everybody. Let some people roll in here. But I just gotta say, welcome to WordHack. Excited to have you here. Got a really outstanding show tonight. Post the details for it right here in the chat. We've got an amazing set of presenters coming up for you. We've got Shin Shin, we've got Lazer-Walker, we've got Milan and Neilson, Koerner-Safrata. Those are going to be your featured presenters later on. And of course, we'll have the open projector, as we always do. So that's 5-minute slots of people presenting their work. Right now I'm just vamping, letting people trickle into the stream. My name is Todd Anderson. I'm going to be your host this evening. Man, I really do love the cadence of talking on top of a funky beat. It just gives you so much more time to think. It's like, I don't know, it's like having your voice be sped up in post. Just plenty of time to construct a sentence. Go browse around on the internet while you're still talking. Here, I'm just gonna hop over to another web page. It doesn't matter. Love it. Yeah. Royalty-free music. Funky. Welcome to WordHack. Gonna get started soon. The song has about 30 seconds left in it. And I'm just gonna let it play out. Keep this funky groove before I get the hype train rolling. Big shouts out to Slink for that song, Road Trip. Welcome to WordHack, everybody. What's up, everybody? You're here at the Baby Castles Twitch stream on a Thursday night for WordHack. Make some noise with your hands and faces and keyboards. Clack, 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 clack. Oh yeah, let's really fill up the internet with all these noises. If you want to just mash some keys there in the chat, just any letters will do. Just send me, let me know you're there. Just send me some consonants, some vowels. Let's get this show going. So if you haven't been here before, haven't been to WordHack in New York, WordHack is a now 6-year running show exploring the intersection of language and technology. Runs every month at Baby Castles, which is a long-running New York City DIY digital culture venue, video game arcade. It's a really great spot to hang out, meet people, and a great supporter of independent communities. Because of quarantine, Baby Castles had to close its doors in March, but we are still running events here on the Baby Castles live stream. So since March, WordHack has been live and online here on the Twitch stream. Oh, I love seeing all these letters in the chat. So very excited to be online and here with you, and very excited to welcome some folks who I know we have folks who used to be part of the WordHack community who moved away, and some folks who've just heard about us but live other places and can't make it. So really excited to welcome you all. If this is your first time, or if you're only able to make it to the digital WordHack events, we're still really happy to have you, and hope you'll become part of our community and stay with us. And of course, shout outs to all of our returning WordHack regulars here in New York City, tuning in your own apartments. We love and appreciate you. Make the show still worth doing. This is yeah. So I announced this a little bit on the top of the show with my funky background beat. We want to say once more now that we have the audience a little more assembled. So tonight we're going to have some featured presentations from Shin Shin, Lazer-Walker, and Milan and Neilson, Koerner-Safrata. Let's give it up for your featured presenters. Or you can just type clap in the chat, or a clap emoji, up to you. There's going to be some excellent presentations coming up later this evening. But to start things off, we have the Open Projector. So the Open Projector is something that's been with WordHack for all 6.5 years of its existence. It's a kind of like an open mic, but for digital projects. When I first came to New York, my background's in poetry, and it was really valuable for me to have free open mics I could go to, or like $5, so like not super expensive open mics where you could go and put your name on a piece of paper, and that meant you could share your work. You didn't have to like know the curator, know the person who was running the event. You didn't need to be part of a scene in order to share your work, because I find it's often the other way around, where like the way you become part of a scene, you become part of a community, is by sharing your work. And so if there's not that easy way to share your work and let new people in, then new people can't join, and then a community doesn't keep growing and evolving. So I'm really happy to have the Open Projector as a way to welcome in new presenters, and to welcome back past presenters to give an update on some of the things they're doing. So I'm going to get us started here with our first Open Projector presenter. So would you please give it up to, I think on their first Open Projector presentation, give it up for August. Yeah, August. All right. Switching over to August here.
Are we switched over?
We are switched over.
Hello, hi, this is really thrilling. This is really cool. Hi, I'm August. I'm coming at you from Austin, Texas, where it's a balmy 88 degrees right now. And thank you, Todd and Baby Castles. I'm a huge fan of this, and I'm really excited to try presenting something. My background is in poetry, but I've been exploring game design a bit lately, as one does. And I, as a poet might do, my first project is a game that makes poems. So I'm going to just share my desktop here, and I'll show you Poem Simulator. This is a project I've been working on for a while, but I exhibited at a show last year, and I've been tweaking it a bit since then. And yeah, I want to know, I hope you guys enjoy what it is if it launches. Beautiful, cool. So in Poem Simulator, you are kind of plopped into this strange and beautiful and very lavender, dreamlike environment. And you're surrounded by this debris, this semantic debris. One of my friends said it was like living in a jewelry box. And I kind of like that. So each of these jewels contains various words or phrases. For example, this one, as you can see in the bottom, it contains nouns related to aquatic life. This one, cuss words. Some of them are more abstract, like fruit salad, or, well, prepositions is not very abstract. but this one titled I Wasn't Sure. Each of these cubes represents a stanza of the poem that you are crafting on this gigantic canvas in front of you. And as you attach things like nouns, feelings to the particular stanza cubes, you start to create a poem. So right now I attach nouns, feelings to the first stanza, and I got this stanza, and it's whatever. It's fine. It's not really that good of a poem. But if we throw a bunch of other interesting things on it and pile in a bunch of other images and language and ideas, sometimes you can make something pretty interesting out of this, and it can start as a good starting off point to create an interesting poem. I found that the easiest way to make something that kind of makes sense as a poem is to use a combination of phrases and straight up words. I just want, besides how could I know, besides furry joy ambivalence. Okay, that's not too interesting to me quite yet. But if we continually add things, it's kind of a crapshoot sometimes. What it's doing is it's taking all the words from these objects and calculating a specific length of stanza. I just want before, I couldn't tell about with happiness, elation before. Beyond sadness soared, elation, depression, bomb. Cool, we'll stick with that. That's interesting enough. And we can continually add to this using these other stanzas to create a 3-stanza poem. And for me, this is just kind of a literalization of what it's like to write a poem. You're sort of just sifting through all sorts of ideas that you have and trying to make something that kind of sticks together as a work of art. It can be complicated, it can be difficult. Sometimes things just fall into place. Play what he did, the building collapsed inwards. I watched it drop what she said. Okay, now we're getting someplace that's a bit more interesting of a poem. I kind of like where this is going. I don't like that one. Let's throw some violent nouns in here. Let's throw some cliches in there. Sometimes, you're supposed to avoid a cliche. Sometimes cliches are good. What can I say? Throw some of those in there. Sliced, she smiled, looked down, sky blue blood. She touched my thigh, he grabbed my waist. Okay, this is a pretty interesting poem. I think we're pretty close to being done with this poem here. It's very fast, very simple system. I don't like this first stanza yet. Okay, let's do this. Here's the poem that we've created from the refuse. I just want, after wet beside, with beside, after what was right. Play what he did, the building collapsed inward, I watched it drop what she said. Slice, she smiled, looked down, sky blue blood, she touched my thigh, he grabbed my waist. Is it a good poem? I don't know, maybe. Is it an interesting poem? I think so. Maybe you think so too. So if you're interested in trying this out, you can go to my website and I'll plop it in the chat later. And I would love to see what kind of poems that you guys make. And that's about all of it, Poem Simulator. So thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, August. Very cool. And yeah, please do drop a link in the chat so people can check that out. Let's give it up for August. All right. And coming up next on our open projector, we have returning guest Nick Montfort. Give it up for Nick. Oh yeah. There he is.
Hello. I was about to not sign up for open mic, but I wanted to share with you the new issue of Taper, which we released today. Taper is an online literary magazine for computational poetry, and it's for very short computational poems. So we've had different limits for different issues in the past, but we've pretty much settled in on 2 kilobytes. So a very short amount of code is what animates all of these poems. And I'm going to quickly go through and show you what they look like to try to entice you, to get you to take a look at Taper. The URL is in the chat. All of the work that we have in this issue and all of the previous issues of Taper is licensed as free and open source software. And it looks like the very first piece here is by our very own Todd Anderson and is a simulated sort of phatic chat in which you have a back and forth to link you to someone. If you're stuck without an internet connection, but you have 2 kilobytes of space free on your hard drive, you can use this to simulate a lifeline. This is a piece I did with Derek Beaulieu, concrete poet, visual poet from Canada, and it's based on a Letraset poem of his. This is a piece by J.R. Carpenter, A Storm in 2K, that brings up some of her work with water, with weather, producing these very concise and beautiful couplets. Richard Carter's A Square Tweets Recollections of Spaceland gives you these example tweets from Flatland experience. Angela Chang's piece, Crumbs, in which continues her work with bread and toast, is an erasure poem that allows you to click on it and chew away at it. Leonora Flores' Social is a dumb show lasting just about a minute and a half of people partying indoors in the age of the pandemic, and you can find out what results from that type of behavior if you choose to go to Taper and let this play out. Katie Giro's Whale Fall actually, I think, nicely anticipates the next issue of Taper. The theme for the next issue is a throw of the dice in reference to Mallarmé's poem. And so the arrangement of words and also the nautical theme is brought up here. The current issue has as its theme Pent Up and is related to confinement during the pandemic. It's the 5th issue of Taper. The next issue, the 6th issue, relates to dice. And you can scroll down and read this poem. Combinatory Nyarika by Mario Guzman is a poem in both Spanish and an indigenous Mexican language. And you can choose if you want it to proceed in 24 hours or 24 seconds. It provides a simulated experience of a pilgrimage. Here is Julie Say's Round and Around, an animated poem showing a very regular experience of life, which fortunately is still going on, but often seems quite bewildering. I think an experience that a lot of us have these days. The Horizon by Hannah Jenkins has lines of verse moving symmetrically toward this vanishing point. Milton Laufer's Isolation Soliloquies, which is interactive. You can actually arrange that these helixes of text move toward a drinking vessel on the right-hand side, is a strand of thought or strands of thought that play out in times of loneliness and isolation. Pent Up Pentagrams, Mark Marino and John Murray's work, stamps out slightly modified words in these pagan symbols. And while we have pagan symbology, we also have a Christian plea from another artist. But before we get to that, Alison Parrish's Throws actually works differently in different browsers. presenting different error messages. Leonardo Solas, The Spell, gives us what is basically a one-word poem, but it's a word that is ever-changing, transforming in very unusual ways. And Johanna Joseph Walia's Monde Instable is an example of an interactive poem that is in French. It's a Francophone Nigerian author. And he also provides us with Hope Lost Hope, which is a wall of text resisting the response to climate change and the current COVID-19 pandemic. And then finally, Zach Whalen presents us, it runs very, very slowly in my Firefox browser, but it's a very rapidly scrolling sort of fidget spinner in other systems, including Chrome and actually iOS Safari. A genetic sequence that spirals in on itself, Penthouse. So these are a few of the pieces. I'll read a little bit of J.R. Carpenter's A Storm in 2K in closing. And I'll invite you to come and check out these pieces. Rain for 2 hours, vivid lightning. Strong breeze, noon, ditto. Rising barometer, barometer falling. Passing showers, much damage. 6 February 1870. Terrific squalls and thick. Depression, high swell. Rising barometer, tremendous gale. And each of these poems is done in a very short amount of code, 2 kilobytes. Everything that is presented is available as free and open source software. You're welcome to remix it. You're even welcome to send your remixes in for consideration in future issues of Taper. So we hope this will be a delight to you. And there's one more thing I want to show off. And I want to invite you to. I'm working with the MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology to curate an exhibit called Generative Unfoldings. And I want to invite everybody to apply. If you're someone who works in generative art, it could certainly be generative art that involves literary or sonic or other types of generative art production. The deadline is November 1st, so it's coming up very quickly, 2 weeks away. We are awarding up to 15 commissions of $1,000 each. So we've had the opportunities to support the artistic community, and we've taken it. And this generative unfolding projects will result in free and open source software exhibit running live in the browser. It's going to be, the commissions will be selected by a jury, including myself, as well as Sarah Rosalina Brady, Fox Harrell, Lauren McCarthy, and Parag K. Mittal. And we would be delighted to receive your applications. And thanks very much for hearing out what I had to say.
And oops, sorry, I was muted. Great to have you back, Nick. Yeah, let's give it up for Nick Montfort. I'm getting better at not muting myself. You'll see. Thank you so much, Nick. That actually brings us to the end of our official open projector. So thank you again to August and Nick. And since we have a little window of time, I have a small thing I can share with you. which is, let me go over here. Um, oh, here we go. Um, which is my Chrome extension Hitchhiker, which I've presented at WordHack before and talked to you about, is now live on the Chrome Web Store. Very exciting milestone for me. Makes it much easier to install and update. Um, Hitchhiker is basically a tool for doing live performances in the browser and browsing the internet with other people. It's a lot of fun. There's some fun things you can do on there. Um, if you look on here, you can see I'm going to be starting to try and perform a little more often with it. And so if you tune in next Wednesday at 6 p.m., you can catch my breakout performance websites for rich people. It'll be very exciting. Next 6 p.m. next Wednesday. But yeah, I invite you to check it out. And yeah, you can just make rooms and browse around. It's a little hard to convey exactly what's going on just through a stream or without making everyone install it. But hey, I recommend it. You can do some fun stuff. I'll just make a little WordHack room, and then we can just go over to babycastles.com. Just maybe say WordHack is great.
WordHack is great.
And, you know, just mess around a little bit. Maybe do a little drawing. So yeah, this project is called Hitchhiker. And I'll post the link in the chat. Oh no, I lost it from Web Store. You can also access it by searching for Hitchhiker in the Chrome Web Store. There it is. Oh man, it took so long to get here. Very excited. If you want to check it out, that's where it is. Anyways, that's what I've been working on. Tune in next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for I'll do a little performance. I think I'm going to try and do performances every week. But if you're using it or want to do your own sort of performance with it, let me know. Alrighty, that's enough of my own personal spiel. Let's get back to the big cam. But yeah, let's get started here with some of our featured presenters. And coming up first for you this evening, we have Milan and Neilson Koerner-Safrata. So Milan and Neilson are the two members of the experimental game and interactive art studio Screenprint. They make interactive art using game engines and they use a lot of game tools to make different things that are maybe games, maybe not. Kind of playing with some of those ideas, but they're playing a lot with virtual worlds and playing with some of the differences between being in a screen and IRL. Really excited to see what they have for us this evening. So please give it up for Milan and Neilson Koerner-Safrata. Clap, 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 clap.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, I'm going to be sharing my screen in a sec. Let's see. Okay. So thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm here to share a game that I worked on with my brother Neilson. As you heard, we have a game studio together, and the type of games that we enjoy creating really center around the personal relationships that people have with the game worlds that they create. So also Neilson's on the call, but I'll be speaking most of the time if you want to say hi, Neilson.
Hey everyone, I'll be in the chat and also hanging out in the game that we're playing together. So if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, and if Milan doesn't see them, I'll try and answer them. And yeah, Milan will take it away.
Yeah, so Garden of Earthly Delights is a multiplayer game played in the browser. So actually, you could drop some links in the chat and then everyone can open it up. I'll give you a sec to get in game, but obviously you can see it on the stream too. I'm using Firefox. Chrome works well too. Not sure about Safari or other browsers. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind the game and then some observations that came up while developing it. So the Garden of Earthly Delights is a painting by Hieronymus Bosch, and it was done in the 15th century in the Netherlands. It takes the form of a triptych with the left panel showing the Garden of Eden, and also depicted are Jesus, Adam, Eve, and an array of animals. The center panel shows a sort of like orgiastic array of humans and animals, and they're engaging in this sensual play. It looks like they're in the same space as the garden, but clearly some things have changed. And then the right panel depicts the Last Judgment, which is rendered in very typical surreal fashion for Bosch, with its sort of like nightmarish ambiguity. And there's also a couple instances of animals really retaliating. You'll see like these rats tearing apart at night. There's a bird devouring a human quite prominently in the frame, while crows fly out of their butt. And there's a rabbit blowing a horn, a pig wearing a nun's garb. I think if you open it yourself, you can pick out even more detail. And I'll be in the center panel, so I see a lot of you have already joined in. And I'm flying high as one of the hawks, so I'll just dolly around the frame a bit. You can move freely, talk, and then you'll be occasionally attacked by hunters as well, which you might have noticed since they've gathered around. So maybe I can just do a quick flyby for everyone who's not already in the game. Help me. Okay. So the first thing you'll notice is obviously this painting is rendered in pixel art. This is not Bosch's painting. And the art's taken from a popular strategy game called Age of Empires 2, which takes place somewhere between the Dark Ages and the onset of Western colonialism. It's an offshoot of a genre called 4X, which stands for explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. So as you can imagine, these kinds of games place you in command of a civilization with the goal to rapidly grow your empire, usually through resource extraction and conquest, with an emphasis on technological advancement. And you're playing as one of the animals from Age of Empires, but within Bosch's painting. And this idea came around from a cheat that's built into the game, which you activate by entering natural wonders in the chat window. And that switches you from one of the player-controlled civilizations, such as the Brits, French, or Spanish, to the nation of Gaia, which represents nature. And Gaia is present in every single game, every single match in Age of Empires, but as a non-player civilization. And they control the animals that are scattered around the map, such as fish, birds, livestock, predators. So although the normal experience of playing Age of Empires centers around accumulating resources in order to construct buildings, raise armies, Gaia is like this silent spectator that's usually the victim of your play. And to illustrate this, earlier in the year I played a series of games that lasted several hours where we really pushed the available resources in the game to their limit. It's typical for players to go through things like gold and stone, which represent key resources. But by the time these games were over, we'd chopped down pretty much every tree on the map, we'd killed all the animals, and eradicated all the fishing stock. And the result was a completely barren map, which counterintuitively led me to resign, because it's actually quite difficult to end the game once you've run out of these key resources. It's a sort of like stalemate where fighting is impossible. So we wanted to create a game where you could enjoy this kind of spectacle and sort of its tragic and comic dimensions, like a chat room to watch the world end. Neither of us are new to using Age of Empires as a creative tool, though. It's got a built-in level editor that's very robust. And as a kid, I'd use that to create these naturally lush levels that were sort of like spaces that would invite the sort of sprawling, rich empire that you'd want to create as a player. But ultimately, I think it was more fun to imagine these types of scenarios than to play them through to their completion, which results in this sort of inevitable destruction. And in that way, the triptych, Bosch's triptych, the Garden of Earthly Delights, is a great device for exploring this, because you see they're sort of juxtaposed side by side are both Genesis and Last Judgment, and it's sort of like they coexist, they're contemporary. And so that's how I feel about this, the experience of playing Age of Empires. As soon as you begin the game, the Eden sort of prefigures the wasteland. But then on top of that, even past the idea, it was really fun to discover how Age of Empires is already very surreal, especially the way that the game is presented. The forests, just like in Bosch's painting, are these impassable objects that create pools of negative space, obstacles in the frame. And there's this perfect manicured grass carpet that permeates the entire world uninterrupted, except for where it blends smoothly into the water, or it creates like perfectly circular pools, because the way that you paint the terrain is with this circular brush. And then there's the perspective, this isometric perspective, which is not really perspective at all, that it flattens everything in a sort of medieval style, the kind of thing that you'd expect to see before perspective was really popularized, discovered. And moving past that, there's the level editor itself lets you create any species or place any species you want. So you get these geographically impossible maps where you've got all the fashion of animals living alongside one another, just like you see here with tigers, elephants, sheep, wolves, horses. But even in regular play, that's actually the player experience, where the game will spawn in animals individually just to have them present on the map for you to hunt, such as like a lone elephant, a lone boar, a lone tiger. And it feels like the sort of Book of Beasts, where the authors only compiled one of each animal for your viewing pleasure and consumption. And then during development, we had a couple fun bugs that I want to share. Let's see. When we launched the game, the hunters were a little bit overexcited, and they hunted everything to extinction. So it was only really possible to hide in the side panels, while the middle panel became this sort of like mountain of bones, which pretty much enforced, I think, part of what the game's investigating, which is this divide between the natural world and the human world. Let's see, and then, oh yeah, this happened to me. If you can't actually do this anymore, you can try, but if you changed to a human while a hunter's arrow was flying through the air, we didn't account for the fact that a human could hunt a human, and it created an error. So that, once again, reinforcing that divide. If you try to do it now, the arrow just lands on the ground. But it was a good emergent moment. And then other than that, also birds could fly outside of the frame, which I really loved. If you can try to escape the colliders in the game, then please enjoy the view. It's sort of grassy plain just falls into nothingness, and I think breaks the illusion quite well. That's all I have to say about development. After bugs were resolved, I got to see a few fun instances of folk games. So obviously there's not a whole lot of ways to interact here, but there was an okay amount of role play happening. People having races between animals, hide and seek, and then role playing in chat, like someone saying "want a cyber," for instance. So I think that's my presentation. And I hope you have fun mingling in the Garden of Earthly Delights, and thanks for playing. And yeah, I guess I'll just go around a little bit, see what people are up to. Okay, we've got Todd Sheep, Jim Tiger. Very good. Okay, thank you.
Oh no. Thank you, Skippy. Sorry, I was muted. Let's give it up for Milan and Neilson. You could tell from me clapping, maybe. Uh, but yeah, let's give it up for them one more time with audio. Yeah. All right. Um, and yeah, the really like the Zoom screen share frame rate doesn't really quite give it justice in terms of how fun and smooth the animations are when you're in there yourself. So if you didn't hop in, I recommend checking out that link in the chat. If you ever want a fun, discreet place to hang out with a friend or and chat as a couple of ostriches that are watching the world burn, I can highly recommend. Uh, it's a lot of fun and a really good place to be. Um, so thank you so much to Milana and Neilson. Um, so we are at about the halfway point of our show, um, and we are going to take a short break in just a moment. But before we go to our break, I would like to tell you about a little place called Baby Castles. Baby Castles is a real special place. Uh, they've been the host of WordHack for quite some time. Oh, there's my big head. Let's make my head nice and small. All right, there we go. Uh, yeah, all right, here we are. So Baby Castles has been the home of WordHack for 6 years now. Uh, it's a really great place to be and to support. We have some great streaming events going now as well. If you enjoy WordHack and enjoy this community, the best way you can support WordHack is to become a member at Baby Castles. You can click this Become a Member button on babycastles.com. And I believe Bobo Castles in the chat has been posting some other links you can use. But becoming a member for either $1, $5, or $20 or $50 a month really helps support Baby Castles, helps support events like WordHack. WordHack is funded this year by the Lower Manhattan Cultural Center. We got a grant through Baby Castles to help support and pay all of our speakers. So Baby Castles has really been great at helping the show and providing staff and support for it. And yeah, so if you enjoy WordHack, want to help keep it going, becoming a member is a great way to do that. I can also recommend, though, just if you're just passing through, not sure if you're ready to become a member, you can still drop us a few bucks if you enjoyed or are enjoying the show here on the event page and with friends. We really appreciate that. So that's all for this interstitial about supporting Baby Castles. But as is sort of a tradition here in the Baby Castles live stream, it is time for a 4.5-minute break with some saxophone music. I'm trying to shift over to royalty-free saxophone music because Kenny G is not in the public domain. But I've got a very special saxophone song for you this evening from our good friend MBB. So let's take this is only a 3-minute song. Let's take a 3-minute break. Go get a drink, go run to the bathroom. We're going to take a break for as long as Sax by MBB takes to play. Let's jam. Sax by MBB, royalty-free music YouTube channel, another jam. Oh, welcome back, everyone. That was a blast. Good to be back. Hope you enjoyed your short little saxophone break. Got to stand up, move around a little bit. Feels nice. Feels nice to move your body. Very smooth, very fun. Very excited now to welcome our next guest, our next featured presenter, who is Shin Shin. They're an artist, a designer, educator, and a community organizer. Lately, they've been doing a lot of work on kind of like researching and reinventing communication tools and chat rooms, and teaching different ways of how to interact and create new social spaces online. Sort of a theme of the night overall, I guess. Really happy to have them with us. Please welcome Shin Shin.
Hey y'all, I'm so excited to be here. Love Baby Castle and love WordHack, love the space and the community. Thanks for inviting me, Todd. So today I am going to talk about a work in progress project that I am doing. Okay, I think the screen is showing here. I'm working on at IBeam actually, and this project is called TogetherNet. And it is a communication software that is designed around the notions of consent and transparency. And so by this point, you might ask, what does that mean? And I think it's one of those things, the more I think about it, the more meaning sort of evolve. My starting question though is really thinking about our digital consent and our relationship with data on an everyday browsing and communication experience. So my first question is, how do we build a communication software around the notion of consent where users can make explicit decisions on what happened to their data? So my departure point here is really starting off with this zine that Una Lee and Dan Tolliver has created, and I'm actually gonna drop the link in the chat here. This zine is called Building Consentful Texting. And it is really brilliantly sort of offering a departure point on thinking about how a lot of the ideas and understanding of how consent operate in the physical world that people have generated can be applied and mapped onto thinking about digital consent. And if we can think about, the relationship between our physical body versus digital body, and how we might want to consider consent in a digital realm with our bodies, a lot of things sort of become more clear. So here are the models. It's called the Fries model. It's actually used by Planned Parenthood to describe what a consentful act look like. And these are the 5 keywords. The first keyword is freely given. And that definition is doing something with someone is a decision that should be made without pressure, force, or manipulation. And so this can very easily be mapped onto thinking about like user and server consent. What are ways to like really think about how pressure and manipulation and coercion operate in the everyday sort of handing off of our personal data to different servers, and think about how to exit that framework. The second keyword here is reversible, and the idea is that any decision that one has previously made can be changed over time, right? So something I said yes to, I can say no at a later time, at any given time, and there should be no repercussion around that. So that's also in relation to thinking about user and server consent. That is also something something that I have been working on building. So if the user agreed to store their data, there's always a way to change their mind and remove it, and try to be as traceless as possible in that process. And the third keyword here is informed. And that is really just thinking about how can software UI language and system broadcast can become more honest and more accessible in the way we inform the user what is happening on the back end, right? And it's actually I find it to be a really exciting and creative exercise to try to figure out how to translate some of the deeply technical languages that oftentimes is being used to refer to like network technology or or server technology, and try to translate that into something that my mom can understand, or something that's accessible and creative. So I'll talk about some of the thoughts and examples that I have been working with later on. But the fourth keyword here is enthusiastic. And this actually I find to be the hardest one to achieve in an interface context. How do you make it like encourage a situation that a user is enthusiastic about agreeing to something? I'm still grappling with that. So if anyone have any suggestions or ideas, please reach out to me. The fifth one is specific. So saying yes to one thing doesn't mean that you're saying yes to the other, right? Agreeing to a user agreement like A doesn't mean you agree to like A1, right? So be very specific and informative about how you inform the users through a software framework is a lot of what I'm thinking about. So yeah, these are just some side notes and thinking about like the subsequent subtext and like consequences relating to each of these keywords within a communication software context. And so a lot of you might have already seen this chart, some of you might haven't, but very, very brief sort of, display of different kinds of networks that exist in the world. Historically, traditionally, there's like the centralized network, which probably is closest to what we use on a daily basis for those who are participating in Gmail, Google, Facebook, and myself included, that operates on a centralized network where servers are at the center, and storing and carrying and transmitting every information that's coming in from all different directions. There's also the distributed network and also the decentralized network. So all these different kinds of distribution of servers and nodes and computers actually really is a good way to think about how power operates in the space of the internet. So in thinking about what I was going to use to build part of the communication software, I decided that, it was actually pretty important for me to have both a ephemeral mode in the communication software as well as the archival mode. So meaning in my personal experience, like when I am communicating or having a meeting or talking to someone, like just friends online, there is like a part of me that want the communication to be ephemeral and traceless, just as if I'm talking to them at a park. And there's also another part of me where like some content need to be archived for X amount of reasons. So here, in thinking about the ephemeral mode for the chat, I went into looking at and assessing a couple different P2P protocols listed here. The first on the left is WebRTC, second is Hypercore, and the third one is the Secure Scuttlebutt. And sort of basically took each of these protocols and assess them based on that consentful matrix that I showed, right? So how do each of these protocol actually match or not match like a lot of the consentful acts that I'm hoping to encourage in this space? So I ended up with using WebRTC at the end. It's got, every one of these protocols have like strengths and weaknesses. With WebRTC, there is a immediate vulnerability relating to the exposure of the public IP address. And hypercorrection has a similar problem from my understanding, but there are workarounds and there are ways to work around it. And I decided to go with this one as a starting point. So the way WebRTC worked that I thought is, I mean, I think it's really interesting for me. I don't know about everyone else, but the way it works is that like I have my computer and, you know, say Todd have his computer, and we each connect to our own respective server, and from there we get a generated peer ID that's, you know, a unique identifier for each of us, and we actually look for each other and do this kind of like high five motion in the middle and exchange our peer ID. And once that happens, we don't need the server anymore, and we just communicate with each other through the media path. So the messages that we're sending back and forth to each other don't go over the server once we make that initial gesture of exchanging our peer ID. So that's so nice and fun. Like out of the box, like working with a peer-to-peer protocol, a lot of times you start with just establishing like two people. So I also gone through a phase where now the chat work with multiple peers. It's still under development, but we're going one by one right now with every step. But yeah, so the idea of like having multiple peers is now there's like a direct line between every single peer, and we can talk to each other. Even if one person dropped, everybody else is still connected through a direct connection line. So going further, like I was saying, like once I start thinking about consent, like it kind of blew up, and it just kind of like got more and more accumulative. And to organize my thoughts, I had to like create a map, and this is what I ended up with. And so I for the software for Togethernet, I'm thinking about thinking about consent in 3 different layers, and creating a document of what I call the code of consent, which is a specification, a document that details the levels of consent and protection that the user have while using the software. So there is on the first level, the peer-to-peer consent. So how do we make sure or encourage consent for gestures between different parties involved? And the second part is peer-to-server. And the third part is server-to-server. So if you create a instance of Togethernet for your own group, and you want to connect and talk to another instance created for another group, how can you ensure that these 2 groups are going to respect and abide consent for gestures when they interact with each other? And so much of I'll get into it in a little bit too, but so much of like what can be observed, say like on Mastodon or on some of the federated network, is this scenario where everyone, people are hosting the instances on their own servers, and therefore it becomes impossible or difficult to moderate, right? Like the kind of moderation that's enforced centrally through like platforms like Twitter. A decentralized model makes that difficult. And so the server-to-server consent is really thinking about that. And so here's the mock-up of the interface, and so it once I started mocking up interface, once I started writing these like system broadcast message that is supposed to be transparent to the users, I started realizing that, I don't want to just like overwhelm the users with a lot of information, every time they do something. and so it's a really careful dance and balance of like how much information to give, how much information is an external link, and also like how much I can really like rethink how like user interface and interaction work to kind of like embody the things that's happening on the back end. So what you're seeing here on the left-hand side, there are two tabs. The active tab right now is a generated title for this room called Sitting at the Park. And the reason why it's called Sitting at the Park is because I'm trying to use this phrase to indicate the privacy level that people are chatting on, right? So if your public address is exposed, but you are communicating on a secure encrypted channel, like it is similar to being at a park, sitting on a picnic, talking to your friends. By default, no one is listening in and no one's recording your conversation. However, if someone intentionally wants to, like, secretly record your conversation or find ways to interfere, there is a possibility to that, right? So it's very different from like being in your bedroom talking to someone in an intimate way. Sitting at a park is a private situation, under given circumstances. So here, like user essentially land to the center green circle, and they are all connected, like representing that peer-to-peer mode of connections, and they're all represented by a avatar, and they can talk to each other. And the green circle actually creates a private chat within this mode. So the moment one of the avatar exit that green circle, they can no longer see what's being chatted inside of that green circle. So this is similar to like a Zoom breakout room, if you will. And so and the next thing is when you are typing chats, it's okay. So this is like a chatting / drawing software. When you type in a message, it actually leaves it drops a residue. It drops like a shadow of your avatar itself onto the screen, and so those boxes that you're seeing on the screen that scatter everywhere are messages. So there are 4 people in this room, each represented by a different color, and they can each like drop messages and kind of draw onto the screen. And there are different implications on what, on the position of like, or how you draw out the messages. So if you leave a message next to, right adjacent to someone else, you create a threaded message. And if someone asks for a consent on something that they want, everybody's consent for, like your avatar can go over their message and hit enter to provide consent. So I'm like starting to like think about this chat room in a very like spatial way, and also thinking about, just like my love for like some of the tradition of like drawing software, and thinking about how to like find a fine balance between like usability versus like playfulness. And this is the archival mode that you're seeing here. So upon like agreeing, archiving certain kinds of messages from the Sitting at the Park, AKA ephemeral chat mode, you can push those conversations into the archive, right? So I think, there's like a lot of instances that I encounter where, maybe like I give someone my email in like a communication chat room, and they just put it on like a Google spreadsheet, right? So this is kind of like really like, slowing that process down, so that if I type my email in the Sitting at the Park mode and people want to archive it or want to put it into a document, there needs to be a consentful process that happens. And the display of the boxes that you're seeing on the left is also a attempt to mirror the database infrastructure that this is being stored at. Currently, this is connected to Postgres, even though I'm actually in the process of reevaluating that and possibly migrating to a different database format. And okay, so I'll show actually the software here. So what you're seeing here is, still early prototype. Not everything that I've showed work yet. Someone has connected. Thank you. I don't know who that was, but someone has got on and connected to me. Cool. So what you could do here is you can click on the anonymous default name and type in your name. And you could possibly move around. And I'm gonna say hi. Oops. Ooh, look at that. Okay, so so you can move around and speak. And the threaded message and the consent code gesture doesn't work yet, FYI. And also like the position might be a little off because there's some bugs I have to fix right now. It's an early prototype, but you get the idea. So it's, yeah, it's the idea of like, yeah, it's almost like a mix between like a chat room and a game space. And I'm really like enjoying that like delicate balance between a chat room and a game space. And I actually have never used this with so many people. This is really exciting. It's usually just me and myself in my bedroom. So this is cool. Thank you for testing this. And honestly, I would love to like play this again with you once all the bugs are solved. Oh, also, what's really fun is you can record audio. So you see a microphone here, and you can actually, I don't know if mine is like connected now, but you can actually like hold down the audio and record. So you can say, hi. 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 Yeah, so so audio messages is also part of the goal. And so some of these like just like small decisions relating to like, oh, should I like enable like live audio versus like just sending back and forth audio clip, you know, it's like really like for me like really for me like thinking about like how do you work with how do you like design like speed and how to design rhythm in a communication software, right? Like I think a lot of like when thinking about consent, like slowing down and giving time, like giving time, space and time for people to respond and to like, you know, move around and like, you know, be with themselves. Like is that like respecting personal boundary is very important, and I think that like part of the like every single consideration here is like thinking about like how to like encourage that. So someone asked, I love how I can just like read your question here. I don't have to go to Twitch, but like, how do I ask for consent? You can't yet. Sorry, it's not there yet. But it will be. And if you email me, I would love to like let you know when I'm ready to do like a community like play testing. I'm gonna take a screenshot of this, just so lovely. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to my regular thing here. So just like continuing, like talking about the federated code of consent. So this is really like thinking about how can this software join forces and be a part of the federated web, but with an angle and an emphasis on thinking about consent, right? So one way I'm thinking about doing this is to create standardized code of consent specification that can be hosted through ActivityPub, so that when different pods of TogetherNet are connecting to each other, there can be a sort of like verification process. So talking about ActivityPub, it's kind of a big topic, but I'll just like briefly explain it. It's basically, you know, the best metaphor to explain what ActivityPub is like, you know, our ability to email someone, you know, like who hosts their email on a different server, right? Like Gmail, people using Gmail can email people who are using DreamHost, and we can all kind of like cross server communicate, and there's no there's no problem in terms of like receiving that messages, right? Whereas like if you want to like cross message between like say WhatsApp and Telegram, it's people don't do that, right? It's seen as two different platforms. So using ActivityPub is a way to create synchronization between different pods that's using ActivityPub. And I'm thinking about the goal, the idea here is to actually host the code of consent on on the specific instance of TogetherNet, but in the future it can also be hosted on other kinds of federated network platforms, so that when different platforms are connecting and attempting to synchronize content with one another, there can be a kind of like like matching up agreement. It's almost like code of conduct, but like consent specific, if that makes sense. So in this case, if both instances of TogetherNet have matching code of consent, then they can go ahead and communicate and synchronize content with each other. If they have two different versions of code of consent, then a layer of protection is in place where where there needs to be like additional buffer and verification process. I kind of feel like I might be going over time, so I'm gonna go fast. So here the three use cases, and actually this is translating to like the three different specific modes of communication that I'm working with right now is the facilitated mode, the direct action mode, and the egalitarian mode. And I provide a brief, simple description on what each of those chatting mode would mean and how they might affect consent. Because like just because one is chatting in egalitarian mode doesn't always mean that they're all equal, right? Because we all sort of like bringing the invisible like social power structure that into a room whenever, even if meetings are conducted in an egalitarian way. So each one of these modes have its pros and cons. So I'm really interested in like thinking about how by referencing some of these meeting style that a lot of activists and different kinds of creators have tried out and employed in their spaces, we can start also thinking about the peer-to-peer consent, which actually, even though I was like on the first layer of those three things I listed, I find the hardest to think about in relation to software design. And the next step is so I'm still in the fellowship at IBEAM, and I am about to start a journey of like working with a software developer who will help me like sort out a lot of the next steps for the software. But also I am looking for a community. It doesn't have to be a big community, it can be a small community to work with to create an iteration of the software. Because the whole point for me of like thinking about creating TogetherNet is to make a basic template that other people can remix and use it for their own purposes, however way makes sense to them. So these are some ideas. Like one idea is like I'm really interested in like how the software might be useful for like people who are working with oral history. So possibly thinking about how to like iterate the basic template into an oral history recorder, or in art organization context, for instance, like how do you iterate the software to make a collective decision maker? So those are things that I am thinking about. And if you have ideas or if you're interested, please email me. and also this is a URL website for like just like getting some of the information that I've described and a little more. So please feel free to check that out. And thank you so much. And sorry if I've run over time.
You're fine. Thanks so much, Shin. Let's give it up for Shin. That was awesome. Let's get some claps in the chat. That was really great. And that really like highlights a lot of the way of the, I don't know, we're so used to thinking about the work that goes into making technology as being just like hacking lines of code and tying software packages together and producing minimum viable product and what have you. And I think Shin is doing a great job of highlighting that, like, all of the work that that a lot of tech companies don't do, but like that it is a lot of work to figure out what is the proper consentful model for how we want our technology to interact with each other. And there's a lot of research and a lot of thought and a lot of iteration needed to kind of like figure out the right model to land on. So that was really cool to see your approach on that there, Shin, and hope that's a model for how other people will approach developing new technologies. All right, that was great. And so we are now to our final speaker. Very excited to have M. Lazer-Walker here with us. M is now based in Toronto, I believe, but was previously a regular guest at Baby Castles in New York, and she is a experimental game maker and technologist. Makes all kinds of different sorts of things to interact with. I'm very fond of her game Chirp Club, which we played a lot at Baby Castles back in the day. But in addition to her own work, she's also the organizer of Roguelike Celebration, which just happened earlier this October. It's a really great gathering in support of roguelike games and developers, procedural generation, that kind of stuff. So she's got a really great perspective, both from her own work and from the community she curates. Really excited to have her with us here today. Please give it up for M. Lazer-Walker.
Hey everybody, so glad to be here. Let me get screen sharing going. Cool. Let me know if that's not working. Otherwise,
looks good to
hi,
me.
I'm M. I use she, her, they, them pronouns, and I currently work at Microsoft as a cloud advocate focused on games and spatial computing. But as Todd mentioned, I'm here to talk about Roguelike Celebration, which is a conference I've been running for 5 years. This year was our first time that we went online, which I had a lot of really complicated feelings about because I have been having a lot of trouble with online events. I think I am sort of very far on the spectrum of I go to conferences and meetups and all of that, not for the talks. I would rather watch those on YouTube later. I go there to have conversations and hang out with old friends and meet new friends and all of that good stuff, which current online events aren't great at. And so I've been doing a little bit of prototyping around how can we try to fix that? But then we started talking about Roguelike Celebration, and all of a sudden I was going to be responsible for running an event, and I figured I should make this one that I actually want to attend myself. And so we ended up building our own custom social space that is sort of a lot like an online game. And I wanted to talk a bit tonight about how it works. What is the sort of design decisions that went into it? Were those successful decisions? Because this was sort of a weird experiment in how to run a conference. Well, I'm going to sort of explain context in a bit, but if you just want to get your fingers dirty and like want something to fidget with, you can go check it out now. Just go there in a web browser and create an account. If you attended the actual event, you'll have to make a new account with like the database, but you have to log in with Twitter or Google. Sorry about that. If you get errors about like it just doesn't look like it's working, especially if you're on Safari, you might need to either enable third-party cookies or use a different browser. Sorry, there's a whole other discussion I could have about like technical choices around our authentication providers, but that's not what I want to talk about today. So the main thing that I really wanted to solve with the sort of thing that we built was how can I make it so you can have small group discussions with other people, say like anywhere from 2 people to 10 people, and maybe you know some of those people, but if you don't, that's cool too. You're going to make some new friends. And so how do you actually build a piece of technology to enable that? We came up with sort of a bunch of different sort of design tenets around what actually matters. And one of them was a thing that is beautiful about events festivals, conferences, meetups, parties, is that you are pulled outside of the context of your daily life and you're brought to this new space that puts you in a different headspace. Whether you're at a conference to learn things from talks or meet people, or because your company is paying for you to take a vacation, being in a new place is valuable. That is really, really rough when we are now spending all of our time sitting at our desks at home, and we're spending 40 hours a week, if you're any sort of knowledge worker like me, sitting in Slack or Discord or Microsoft Teams and some video chat software. It's really uncomfortable to then say, great, I'm going to spend my entire weekend in a text chat client and a video chat client. That's not going to get me outside my brain. So even if the thing that we built was going to be horrible and more or less a failure and much, much worse than if we just spun up, a Discord instance and a Twitch stream, the fact that it felt different would still be valuable and good and worthwhile. The other thing is, so it's very easy to say, yes, we want to allow these sorts of small group conversations, but there's actually a lot of interesting, difficult technical infrastructure required to enable that. Like if you just have an event with a Discord or a Slack, you're going to end up with maybe a dozen channels, maybe more, and depending on how many people are at your event, probably a couple hundred people in each of those channels. And so your choices as an attendee who wants to talk to other people is either you're taking part in this giant couple hundred person conversation, or you're sliding into someone's DMs, which is kind of awkward. And there's really no middle ground. And there's also, you probably have this sort of awkward sense of FOMO that you have a dozen different infinitely scrolling chat rooms you have to keep checking. A lot of people we talked to just felt really uncomfortable speaking in those rooms with that many people at all. Not great. And conversely, VR has actually solved this problem. Like, it is possible to have these small group conversation dynamics in technology. If you've ever used AltSpace VR or Mozilla Hubs or VR Chat or any of these like VR social spaces, they feel a lot like real life, and that because you have a physical presence that you can move around, because you have spatial audio so you can more naturally hear where people are and where their voices are coming from, because you have the visual cues of being able to like turn your head and like make it clear that, oh, I'm talking to you, you can have the natural dynamics of, we're a conversation circle. I'm going to turn to you and we're going to split off a little side conversation. And then when we're done, we're just seamlessly going to turn back to the big circle again. Like, we don't even really think about how the dynamics of this work in person, because that's just how socializing as human beings works. But the fact that that actually works in VR is actually remarkable. But we also, for most events, you don't really just want to use a VR space. Like, for as much as I love all that technology, it's only really usable if you're a VR nerd. Even if it's something like Mozilla Hubs that theoretically works on smartphones or on non-VR desktop computers, in practice, I have just seen people who aren't gamers or aren't VR users already just sort of not get it or be intimidated by it. So the question is, like, where's the middle ground here? How can we get what works about VR and make it work with something that more resembles Discord or Slack? Related to that, though, we could have this physical space where you can walk around, but talking to strangers is still really awkward. And it works at in-person conferences because, we have these sort of socially acceptable cues and hooks to let you start small talk. You'll strike up a conversation with the person sitting next to you in the minutes before a talk starts. You'll strike up a conversation while you're waiting in line at the bathroom or for a drink. You might notice a logo on someone's shirt or on their laptop and talk to them about that. We have all of these ways that make it socially acceptable to initiate conversation with a stranger that you're not going to get by default in an online space. So my hypothesis was basically, well, online games are actually really, really good at doing this. People have been making friends in online games for as long as there have been online games. What if we can use sort of like game mechanics and game systems that get people interacting with each other to serve as a basis for their social interactions? We can have sort of people doing things in parallel next to each other as an excuse to strike up a conversation. We can have methods of sort of player expressivity and being able to express who they are that other players can see and sort of start a conversation based on all that good stuff that's going to let people actually talk to each other. Related, like a big inspiration here was Dan Cook, who is a game designer who runs a studio called Spryfox, and he talks a lot about specifically designing your like high-level game systems to like enforce this or like encourage this sort of friendship building. he talks specifically in context of MMOs and how do you do this over the course of months or years, whereas that's obviously a lot trickier if you're trying to make it happen, over the couple hours at an event or a couple days of an event. But the thing that I was particularly inspired by is he talks about social science research around how friendships are actually formed. And sort of one model that sort of works really well is that friendships happen when you have repeated spontaneous interactions over time. Without any of those properties, it is going to be much more difficult to form a friendship. And so if you want something to be spontaneous, that encourages our sense of needing physical presence, because it's difficult. You can't just bump into someone if, again, you're both in the same dozen Slack channels with a couple hundred other people. And if you want repeated interactions, at least over the course of a 2-day event where we're trying to crunch this as much as possible, like you're not going to become best friends with someone, but at least maybe you can be friendly with someone you weren't. We need to get you moving around as much as possible so that you're going to bump into these people more. And so we can design the sorts of like game design hooks we're putting into these spaces to encourage those patterns of moving around and having more repeated interactions. And then also, finally, having video chat with people is really important, and being able to see someone's sort of facial cues and such is really, really important to having a good conversation with them. But I also suspect I don't need to convince anyone in this room that Zoom fatigue is very real. And if we had a full event that was entirely Zoom video chat conversations with people, it would be exhausting. But like, it is really important that like video chat is that much more important than audio chat is more than text chat. Like that fidelity of communication is really important in moderation when used properly. So the sort of conceptual model became the default interaction is text, and we will give you different ways to sort of consensually escalate into audio chat or video chat as you feel comfortable. So you can sort of preserve your emotional energy for when you want to have these more intense, serious conversations. Not like intense and serious feel like weird adjectives to use. Like you're not necessarily, talking about life and death, but maybe you are. I don't know. So as I sort of hinted at earlier, I hope people are having fun in the space and not saying mean things, because I'm not there to moderate it. We built this social text-based virtual world where we had this sort of map that represented a conference space. It was very loosely based on GitHub's event space where we normally hosted the IRL event. And then within each room, there was a sort of fun, flavorful text description of the room. There was sort of various things to play with, like objects you can pick up. This here is the theater, where we were actually just streaming the talks and our live captions in the theater itself. So you had everyone gathering into the theater when it was time to watch talks. And you have text chat. And so as I'm sure a lot of you have found, there are a lot of little objects you can pick up, but also like if you go to the bar, you can drink a polymorph potion and get a random emoji, which both like explaining to other people and hinting how to do stuff like that gives people an excuse to talk and interact, but also like running into someone with the same emoji as you is really fun, and gives you a chance to talk to them. And so we had a whole bunch of things like that. Yeah, so Maze is asking about when you moderate it, do you have to go into each room? So yeah, our like code of conduct policy is a whole other discussion. But basically, there is a way to report a code of conduct violation or something that's gone wrong at any time in the space that immediately gets sent to all the moderators who are logged in. We had a moderator on duty at all times. Everything in here was ephemeral. Like for the most part, our server doesn't have knowledge of messages that were sent previously. You do not receive messages for any room other than the one you're physically in. So you do have to move from room to room to hear conversations, and you just can't access that other stuff. But we did have an audit log that itself had an audit log for access to it. So if there was a code of conduct report by attendees, a moderator could go in and see what happened after the fact. Our sort of frame of reference here was to think about it like an in-person event rather than an online event, that the moderators can't be everywhere at all times. People are just talking and being at an event. But because it is digital, we can give ourselves the slightly stronger tools if things do go wrong. But like we had some video chat that I'll talk about in a little bit, and like we didn't have any way to view history for that. We just had to rely on listening to people when they said that things went wrong. What else? So yeah, I think there is like a question that keeps coming up is internally we talked about this as a MUD. People on Twitter described it a lot as a MUD. If you're not familiar, a MUD, so MUD is multi-user dungeon. It was originally a game that came out in I think 1978 at the University of Essex. And it became the sort of entire genre that became MMOs of sort of text parser-based online games. Like they really were MMOs, just text-based, like without getting into that history. And so conceptually, this feels a lot like a MUD. Design-wise, it is very much not a MUD. Like it feels like you would expect a MUD to feel like in 2020 if you've never played a MUD or if you haven't played one for 20 years. But the UI and UX and the way this app feels, like it is much more like Slack or Discord than it is a historical MUD. Down to like you can like anything you can do by clicking hyperlinks. There is a like text command to do it, but you have to do like a slash command instead of actions being the default and having to do extra actions in order to chat. Bolin, you're asking about are the monitor AI are real people? If you mean like when we were talking about moderators, those were all real people. There are no artificial intelligences in the space, no bots. Everything is human beings. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so MUD. But like, I think I sort of consciously shied away from the term MUD because like the fact that this was text-based, I think I could very easily imagine a version of this that had 2D graphics or 3D graphics. I think there are reasons that text is beneficial. I think people at WordHack buy that. But also for our purposes, you know, I did not want to experiment with coming up with a graphical style. I wanted to experiment with, well, what are the types of social interactions that actually work? What are the ways we should be designing the space and setting the tone in ways that are going to facilitate conversations and interactions? The like ease of modability of text and like the ease of getting new content in made that the obvious choice rather than having to deal with generating art assets. And I think for roguelike celebration specifically, like being text-based was a real benefit for the audience. I think like most attendees of roguelike celebration were really into the aesthetic. We're a conference that is about celebrating a genre of games that historically have ASCII graphics. But I think that is more like why roguelike celebration was such a perfect fit for this than something intrinsic to like the design concepts I'm talking about. And along those same lines, so to be clear, this was a roughly 3-month project where I was doing a lot of the work, maybe most of the work, and we had sort of a smattering of other volunteers and organizers. But part of, like, I wanted to focus all of this time solving these really weird, hard, experimental problems that we didn't have easy answers to and were difficult to playtest. I didn't want to be thinking about graphics and stuff like that. I didn't want to have to think about server scaling. So we have this sort of serverless architecture based on Azure that, you know, the instance we're in right now can support up to 10,000 players without me having to write any new code, which is great because it meant I could just make that decision early on and then not have to think about, well, what'll happen if we have more people than fit on one server in the game. I just wanted to focus on building a thing with this very limited time scale and resources we had. And so in broad strokes, this was great. People immediately got what we were going for. I think one of the biggest things to me is a lot of the way that people talked about the event was how it felt more like they were physically at an event than any event they had been to since quarantine started. Which, like, A, that feels great, but B, I think that's really interesting the way that it resembles the way people talk about virtual reality and sort of presence in VR. And I think it is really cool that, you know, that happened for a like text-based space in a browser, and is a really good reminder that when we talk about immersion, there is little to no correlation between immersion and visual fidelity. Like, you can have the sense of presence in something as simple as some text descriptions and a text chat. I think we also, like, I'll get into the downsides of this in 30 seconds, but there were a lot of these small moments of spontaneity and human interaction that we were hoping would happen, which is great. Like, one of the things that really sold me on, like, oh, great, we did a good thing that worked the way I wanted it to, was someone, like an attendee, spontaneously during a break was like, great, if anyone wants to come to this specific table in the kitchen, bring me an offering and I will give you a tarot reading. That we managed to create this sort of joyful, playful space such that attendees were willing to bring themselves to it and sort of engage with the fantasy at the same level that we were, which is amazing. But it wasn't perfect. Like, this was an experiment. I think we accepted too many amazing, interesting talks. So there wasn't as much socializing time as people would have liked, and we didn't have as many opportunities for video chat specifically. So we ended up, the original hope was we were building our own video chat system. So in any room, you could immediately start up an audio chat or video chat, and you could see who was already in there before you joined, and it would be really low friction. That didn't pan out for a number of reasons. So we ended up having, we had a couple of scheduled unconferencing sessions. So at certain schedule blocks, that we had sort of, you may have seen the note walls around the space where you can sort of add more persistent notes and upvote them. People could say, hey, I want to talk about X, and people could upvote them. We took the most popular ideas and we assigned them rooms. There are the sort of 6 rooms on the right-hand side of the space all have or had Zoom rooms attached to them. So people could go and have conversations there. And that worked really, really well, but people wanted more of that. And also, like, people just didn't have as much time to wander through the space when there weren't talks, so it's hard to say exactly what would have happened. But in general, despite the fact that these moments of spontaneity were happening, and people were having sort of real interesting conversations in some of these rooms, they weren't quite happening as much as I would have liked. And it's hard to say, like, this did improve greatly over a preview event. So we had sort of a free preview event to sort of get people excited for the conference, but also really secretly just to load test the space and make sure it was working well and worth doing and not like immediately bailing for a Discord. People had a much harder time sort of grasping the physical metaphor and wandering around at the event because the physical design of it, like it visually much more resembled Discord or Slack. Like there was a list of rooms on the left side, which made people think like, okay, this is a chat client, I know how to use this, when in fact they didn't. And so removing that, leaning into the game-like experience, you have to use the map or click on the hyperlinks to move, got people to engage with the space more. So I think there are more design tweaks we can make to sort of encourage those sorts of conversations. Like we gestured towards, here are some rooms that are about visual art discussion or about generative art discussion. We could lean into that. I could also imagine leaning much more heavily into sort of game mechanics and saying, cool, if you actually want to talk to people, that's for video chat, and we'll make video chat easier to use. In the meanwhile, we're going to add a lot more to do in this space. So the space is where you collaboratively fidget and you hang out with other people without necessarily talking to them, and it is where you recharge your energy for more video chat. I don't know. Either of those might be good paths, which sort of takes to like my last sort of real frustration, which is, it is really, like, I'm used to play testing all the time. It is really difficult to play test a space where you want like at least 100 people in there. I mean, you could probably get away with less, but like tens of people to like test the social dynamics and see how people are interacting. That's really hard. And I don't know if there's a great answer to that, which sort of brings me to my last sort of point, which is this space still exists. This project still exists. It is all open source. I'm really interested in figuring out how to do more with it, and figuring out sort of Roguelike Celebration was this very specific community that was absolutely perfect for running this sort of experiment that worked wildly well for them. What does it mean to bring that to other communities? What does it mean to bring that towards sort of more artistic communities where people are going to want to, contribute creativity to the space themselves and like have more user-generated content, which is historically a thing that MUDs do very well. On the other side of the spectrum, what does it mean to bring this to an event where like it is a professional conference where the people attending it aren't game designers, so they're not used to the idea that a professional event can be a space for playfulness and joy and silliness. How do you teach people who aren't used to game mechanics how to use this thing when they're used to just Slack or Discord? How do you convince people that text is okay? How do you get event organizers to be able to use this platform and like they're used to just like buying an event platform and being done, where instead, like right now at least, part of why this was so successful for us was like we built and designed the space with rooms and text descriptions and interactions specifically for our community and our culture. Does that mean like as an event organizer, do you need a game designer on staff? Like that's weird. These are hard problems. And I am really, really interested in sort of working with other people who are running events or have communities that think this sort of technology or space might be a good fit. So come talk to me. Like I have like time to work on this a bit as part of my day job. So I'm love to volunteer to help with people who are interested in this. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got, but I'm around. The code is on GitHub, but over the next couple of weeks, I'm doing a lot more work sort of writing about it, both from a design standpoint and a technical standpoint. So if you're interested in this, I would probably say like following me or getting in touch is the better way to do that. So yeah, thanks a lot.
All right.
How does Zoom work?
Thanks so much, Em. That was an amazing talk and amazing to spend time in the space. So a really amazing space you've created along with your team. And it's just, yeah, it's just really, really delightful to be able to move around and kind of listen to your talk while also just drinking polymorph potions and hanging out in the shipping container. That was really delightful. Also just want to say hello to our group of raiders. Good to see you. Thank you so much, Lana Lux, for raiding our stream. Great to see you. This is a show called WordHack, which is a monthly show on the Baby Castle stream about the intersection of language and technology. We usually have 3 or 4 talks and an open projector. We're on the 3rd Thursday of every month right here on the Baby Castle stream. So please come by and visit us again. But yeah, everyone, that brings us to the end of our show. Let's give it up one more time to all of our presenters. That was Milan and Neilson, Koerner-Safrata, Shin, and M. Lazer-Walker. Let's give it up one more time for them. Oh, yeah. And we are going to be back yet again next month. That's going to be Thursday, November 19th. So mark your calendars. And we'll be back again. Please follow, subscribe, keep in touch with Baby Castles. If you want to hop over to babycastles.com and get on our email list, that is a thing you can do. I'll post the event link one more time. This event link has a couple of other links on it that I like to shout out. Here, let me switch over to it. So we've got a couple things on here that you might be interested in. There's this link right here to join the WordHack email list if you want to just get an email every future one. This is how you can find out about future shows. If you'd like to become a member of Baby Castles, click right here, withfriends.co/babycastles/join. And we still do have the WordHack Anthology from the first 5 years of WordHack. It's another great way to support the show. It's just $10. Has 56 projects on here from all sorts of people, a lot of whom you've seen tonight and in the chat. So if you want to support the show, or if this was just one of your first or second time here and want to dig a little deeper into some of the work that comes out of this community, I really recommend it. It's a really, really cool collection of work. All right, everybody, that's all I have for this week. So I'll catch you next time. See you later. Thanks so much for stopping by.